Hello and welcome to the strangest gig I have ever played. True tales from the studio and the stage. I am your host, Chris J. Norwood. This is the podcast where we hear the true tales about all the strange, weird, wild, wacky, terrible, and or amazing gigs we have to take to make it as musicians. On the podcast with us today is singer-songwriter Vanessa Peters, calling from the other side of the world. Let's get to it. Hello and welcome back to The Strangest Gig. Again, I am your host, Chris J. Norwood. A few things here. If you're a fan of this podcast, there are a couple things you could do to really help us out. First off, tell a friend. Help spread the good word about The Strangest Gig. If there's a musician in your life that you think would really enjoy these conversations, let them know. The other thing is to find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever, and follow us and rate us. It helps push us up the top of the searches, which in turn helps grow the podcast, which in turn helps us get even bigger and better guests. Also, one of my goals for this year is to help get some sponsors for the podcast. So if you're a company, if you own a business that would be interested in sponsoring our little show, then please reach out to me. And I'd love to talk to you more about it. And then finally, if you yourself are a musician and you have your own strange gig story, please reach out to me. You can email me, chris@chrisjnorwood.com. You can DM me on Facebook or Instagram, any of that. And let's get you on the podcast. Let's get your story told. Now on the podcast with us today is one Vanessa Peters. Vanessa is a highly acclaimed singer-songwriter originally from Dallas. Her most recent album, titled Flying on Instruments, just came out February of this year, 2024. It was co-produced by her husband, Rip Rowan, as well as Grammy Award-winning producer Joe Reyes. Throughout her career, Vanessa has toured extensively throughout the United States, as well as throughout Europe. She now currently resides in Italy with her husband, Rip. We get into a little bit behind the reasoning for their move to Italy, as well as what it's like touring overseas, and what the European fan base is like. I really enjoyed this conversation with Vanessa, and I think you will too, so let's go ahead and dive in. So, Vanessa, let's jump right in. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you for having me. I know it's early in the morning for you, but it's a great time for me. So.
Yeah, exactly. Well, good. Yeah, so for the edification of our listeners, why don't you tell us where you're calling in from?
So I'm calling from Italy, from Lucca, Italy. 7 hours ahead of you, so it's almost quitting time for me, and your day is just getting started.
Yeah, so. That's so funny. So I'm probably getting a little ahead of myself, but how long have you lived in Lucca? Is that your home base now? And what was so let's start there. How long have you lived there?
It's a complicated answer. The shortest best answer I can give you is I did study abroad a long time ago.
Okay.
Not in Lucca, but in a town not too far from here.
Yeah.
And I lived there on and off for about 10 years. And then I did move back to Dallas, which is where I'm from. I moved back to Dallas in 2010.
Did you grow up in Dallas?
I did. I went to Lake Highlands High School, believe it or not.
Okay. Oh, great.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was funny. I moved away thinking I probably would never live there again. And then when I moved back, honestly, I moved back thinking it'd probably be kind of temporary. I was just going to crash with my parents while I planned my next move. Yeah. And then I met the man that would become my husband, and who was Rip Rowan, you know.
Yeah.
And he had a house in White Rock, and I was like, oh my God, I'm right back where I started. I can't believe it. But it was funny. In that intervening time, Dallas had gotten so much cooler than when I had been there before. It was actually a nice place to come back to.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I ended up, we got married, and I did move back to Dallas, but then we spent a lot of time back and forth because in my previous incarnation in Italy, I had made a lot of contacts here. I did a lot of touring here. So I was trying to keep that going. So for a long time, we did like a couple months here, a couple months there, and we just kind of bounced around. And we were here when COVID hit, here in Italy when COVID hit. And so we decided to stay put because we didn't, it was we didn't want to travel. We didn't want to, we had seen the
Sure.
pictures of airport zoos and we were like, oh, hell no, not even
Yeah.
we decided to stay put. And then that actually turned into like 18 months because we didn't come back until we got vaccinated to travel. And so being here for such a long time kind of just made us realize that we felt at home here. We like being here more. And B, we were a little bit tired of the constant back and forth. So we just decided to sell our house in Texas and move here.
And you're there permanently now. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I always tell everybody
I mean,
forever's a big word,
yeah,
but,
for sure.
but I'm here for now. So,
Okay. That's so great. And,
yeah.
so what's it like, what's been the music scene like kind of over there where you're at? I mean, obviously that was a strong determining factor for you kind of moving over there. You felt like you kind of had a better base of operations over there.
Yeah, I did. Especially I think when I first got started, it was easier to make a name over here because I was sort of this interesting, people were like, "Oh, she's from Texas," And so
Yeah.
I was like, I was this sort of intriguing feature, for
Yeah.
on the music scene over here. So I think that helped a lot. Um, and maybe for me, just I'm pretty shy and I can be fairly insecure, I think, as a musician. And I think probably it was easier for me to play over here where nobody knew who I was except for like whatever it said in my bio.
Right.
I didn't have any sense of like needing to prove myself to other musicians that I maybe worked with in the same music scene.
Sure.
Um, I I think I've always been anybody that's listened to my new record, like there's a song called Better that starts off, I've spent nearly all my life worrying about what other people think of me is the first line of the song. So it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and then the next line is, and even though it's better now, I can't say that I'm free, but it's better. It's a whole lot better. So like, that's
Yeah.
the thing I've been working on just as I've been trying to be, more secure in who I am and myself as a musician. But I do think, it was a nice place for me to kind of spread my wings over here because I didn't
Mm.
have I was unknown to anybody except what they read on the internet.
Right. So did
So,
it feel kind of like a fresh start almost, or just a new
yeah,
career phase, or?
it felt kind of like I could be incognito, even though I was still Vanessa Peters, but nobody
Right.
knew that person. It was just like it's like putting on a different persona, even though it was still me. Rip always says like, that like singer-songwriters, they should be in a band because if they have a band name,
Mhm.
the whatever the band name is, you get to kind of hide behind that. Whereas
Right.
if it's your name, then you're telling people, hi, I'm Vanessa Peterson. These are my songs. The first thing they think is, well, like every song that you're about to sing is about you.
Right.
So
Yeah.
then you start thinking, well, maybe I should change this lyric here and maybe to write this a little bit differently. And then that way, and so like you lose any degree of I can't say that word ever, anonymity. Whereas, and I've often thought to myself, I wonder like how it would have changed the way I wrote and the way I had approached things if I had been a band, kind of like,
Absolutely.
John. I know that you did an interview with John Duflo.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like John has like 12 incarnations of himself. He,
Yeah, and he gets to kind of write from, yeah, like you say, he gets to spread his wings and kind of
yeah.
write from each. It's so funny. I was talking with my wife about that the other day about how, because for a long time I wrote just as a solo artist as well, and
Mhm.
it's funny. People always assume, like you said, that the songs I write are always about me, even if I'm singing from first person, they
Mhm.
assume that that song's about me. So it does make you think, well, if I include this lyric, are there going to be assumptions made?
Mhm.
And not that that should be a motivator, but it is in the back of your mind.
Yeah, I mean, it's an inhibitor for me,
Yeah.
And in this latest record, I actually kind of just said what was on my mind anyway.
Hmm.
But so like, there's a song called "Blind Curves" that starts off. My uncle wanted me to be a doctor. My sister just wanted me to come home, and when I played that for my sister, I knew that she was gonna like instantly be sort of moved by that, because
Yeah.
she does always tell me, like I love you and I'm happy for what you get to do, but like I wish you lived closer, because I'd obviously only see her a couple of times a year,
Right.
and I kind of like, we were listening to it in the car, and I kind of like, cut my eyes over to the side, and she totally was like instantly crying. And I was like, oh God, but it was more just like emotional more than, actual sadness or whatever.
Sure,
But it
sure.
was one of those things where you're like, yeah, I mean, it does make you think to yourself about, should I include this in a song? Because what if it hurts somebody, or what if,
Yeah.
what if it reveals too much about the way I actually feel about things, or whatever,
Yeah.
anyway.
I'm interested, talk about the differences in the fans over there compared to maybe over here, and
I think
the way they respond and react to the music. How is it different?
I think the fans are very similar. I think what's different is, again, especially when I play over here, I tend to get to play listening rooms more often,
Mhm.
in part because, well, maybe in part because of the genre that I play, kind of singer-songwriter, Americana.
Right.
Um, I end up in a lot of listening rooms, and certainly like in the Netherlands and in Germany and Belgium, that part of Europe, and northern, like Scandinavia as well, although I play there very, very, very infrequently. Um, people they're very well behaved. They're just almost to the point where sometimes you're like, are they having fun? Because
Yeah.
they're so quiet out there.
Sure.
I have to tell them sometimes, like, it's okay, just like, it's okay. A little bit of background chatter is not going to kill me. Um,
Yeah.
but again, I think because I am American, and I'm a bit of a, you know, an interesting, so I end up playing like in a lot of small villages, right? And so I think instantly the people that come to the shows are like, "Oh my God, you came to our tiny village in the middle of nowhere." And so they just give you an enormous amount of attention and respect, which is really great for listening type
Yeah.
shows.
Sure.
Obviously, for band shows, it can be a little bit unnerving, because again, we're like we're up there rocking out, and we're like, are they enjoying this, or are we just like,
Yeah.
are we blowing their hearing, or what's the problem?
Right.
Um, but I do feel it's sort of like, I won't say that every show is like playing the Kessler. For those of you that are not from Dallas, the Kessler is,
Mhm.
is a wonderful theater in Dallas, where like no matter whether there's 10 people or 500, it's usually a listening room experience. So I won't say
100%,
that
yeah.
every show in Europe is like that, but I will say that generally, we're much more likely to encounter those sort of rapt audiences
Yeah.
there than we do back in the States.
That's great.
So yeah,
That's
it's
so
lovely.
fun.
It is lovely.
I just played a show at the Kessler, and
I saw. Well,
yeah, and it was
I saw some video anyway on Instagram.
yeah, we had a lot of fun. I love playing there. Like you said, it's the best venue in town. And several of the guys in the band had never played there, and we
Oh,
kind of have
wow.
a loud, kind of boisterous band. And I
Mhm.
had to explain to them, listen, you're going to walk out there, and it's going to be silent, and you're going to
Right.
it's a little unnerving at first, but you just kind of got to know that going out. But
Yeah.
and then we had fun. So
Awesome.
let
That's
let's
great.
back up a little bit and talk about how you kind of got into music, and your start kind of here in Dallas, what that looked like.
So, I got into music kind of by happenstance. I was a creative writing major in college, and I think I assumed I probably would write books, or short stories, and that I
Mhm.
probably would go back to college and get an MFA, maybe teach. That was sort of what I thought I would do upon graduating. But I ended up going to Italy at the end of college and did like a study abroad over there. And I loved this little town that I visited. So when I graduated, I was quite young. I was 20 when I graduated
Mhm.
college, and
Oh,
so
wow.
I wasn't quite ready to go to grad school yet. I wanted to take a year off, so I applied to do this sort of study work exchange thing at the school where I had been a student. They
Mhm.
would take former students. You could live there, work on your Italian, and like get a little stipend and just have an experience in Italy. So I did this. Um, and in August, especially back then, 20 years ago, in Europe, especially in Italy, everything closes in August. Everyone goes on vacation. All the shops are closed. Everything.
Yeah.
It's like hard to find an open grocery store. So, and I didn't have any money, and all of my fellow coworkers from the school had all taken off to go traveling. So I was
Yeah.
living by myself in this old monastery. And I mean, like literally by myself in this monastery for 3 or 4 weeks,
Wow.
sort of subsisting on like canned tuna and cereal. Whatever the cheapest thing I could find was. And I had a guitar that I had bought in college, and I had sort of like taught myself 4 covers, but I never really dedicated any time to it. Even now, I don't consider myself a quote unquote musician. I consider myself more of a songwriter, although I also acknowledge that finally I am quite comfortable with my instrument and I do know how to play it, but I'm not a trained musician. Like, don't ask me to play scales, that's just not what I do. But so I was hanging out with my guitar trying to pass time. You could only read so many books, and I was like, I was bored trying to learn covers. So I was like, well, maybe what I could do is take some of these poems that I wrote this summer and see if I could set them to music. And so it started, in the most cliche way ever. I just had like these super long poems, and I was like, oh, I'll just try to play this little picked figure, some GCD action, and surely there's a song in there somewhere. So that is how it began. And then, but I had very bad stage fright, and I'd never would have wanted to play for anybody, but some of my roommates later that fall, when everybody was back, some of my roommates heard me working on songs, and they encouraged me to go do an open mic there in town. And so I finally did, after feeling like I was definitely just going to like barf up the contents of my entire body onto the floor. But I did it. And so then when I went back to Texas at the end of that period, I was living in Houston. So I started going to open mics, and then I kind of started, playing little coffee shops in Houston and Austin. I moved to Austin for a while, did the coffee shop thing. I started booking, like I booked a little solo tour for myself all across America, not kind of realizing like that was kind of a big deal. Like to me, I was just
absolutely.
like, oh, this sounds like a thing I'll do. This sounds interesting. I was like very naive about it. And I just sort of launched, and there was this thing called Indie Girl. It's long gone, but I don't know if it's gone. As far as I know, it's gone though. It was kind of like a listserv. And so people were very helpful and collaborative. You could email and be like, hey, I'm from Texas and I'm heading towards Indianapolis. Does anybody have a show that I could share or open?
Wow.
So that was kind of how that got. And then luckily I knew people just from college or whatever else. I had like, a friend in New York. I had a friend in Connecticut. I had a friend so I had places to stay, and I just kind of went off, and I kind of got the traveling bug, I think, pretty early, to where it rapidly became harder. Then I would go back home and I would like have a day job for a while. But I would instantly start sort of itching about thinking about like, oh, well, I haven't been to this place yet, or I haven't, or maybe I could do this in Italy. Maybe this would be a way I could get back to Italy. And so then I like started trying to book myself a tour in Italy, which I did.
Yeah.
Because why not? And then it just kind of one thing led to another. And in the meantime, I did find a way to move back to Italy. This like several years have passed now in the telling of the story, and that's when MySpace was kind of taking off, like 2005, 2006. And again, just like Indie Girl, I reached out to other musicians that like I wanted to go to the Netherlands because I'd heard it was a good place to tour. So I just tried to like find people that seemed about kind of my level and just message them and was like, hey, like, could we share a show, or could I open for you and, just sell my merch? And I made a ton of contacts that way in the Netherlands and in Scandinavia. And little by little, that just kind of became my circuit more than the States. And when I would come back to the States, I would bring my Italian musicians that I played with. I'd bring them with me.
Okay.
I was dating one of them at the time. And so, my boyfriend, he would come back with me, and we would do a bunch of acoustic duo shows like in Texas and Texas, Louisiana. But we didn't tour as much because usually when I came home at that point, it was like more about visiting family and friends. And then I would cram in some shows. And so my touring circuit just kind of ended up shifting to Europe, and America became a place I would just come visit family basically and play the occasional show. So, which is strange.
So great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love the, like you said, it's, I don't think it's naivete. I just love that it's, you just did it. Like you said, you just went out and booked a tour and just did it.
I think it was accidental chutzpah. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't know that I couldn't. And so I just did it.
Sure.
And also it helps that, when you're at that level of touring, like it's not that hard to find a coffee shop that will pay you $50 and let you sit in the corner and play covers for 4 hours or whatever.
Right.
Obviously the hard part gets when you have to level up, and earn a living wage and also do a gig that is soul satisfying, because clearly, 50 nights in a row of coffee shop gigs starts to wear on you pretty hard.
It can be tough. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So do you feel like you've been able to make that step, at least in Italy, over in Europe, to kind of
It's like the dude would say, it's you know, it strikes and gutters sometimes. It's like sometimes yes. So we just played some really great shows in Germany this last weekend,
Yeah.
in places that we've been to before, and like people came back out, which is always nice. And then we also played at the end of that tour. I did this little house concert, like a house concert, I suppose, um, in this village in the middle of nowhere. And I thought, who's going to come to this? And they had to they had to turn people away,
Wow.
because the room was over capacity. And that's less to do with me, I think, and more to do with the fact that the guy A is really good at promoting, and
Hmm.
B, I think people, like I said, it's the curiosity factor, right? They're like, oh, this girl from Texas is all the way here in our tiny village. But
Yeah.
it was wonderful because I mean, people were just like hanging on every word of every song, and
Yeah.
it was those sorts of nights where you're like, well, wouldn't it be great if all if all shows could be like this? Then
Yeah.
then everybody would do it.
Yeah.
But
Sure. Do you
yeah.
find that the language that the is there a language barrier at some of your shows, and how, like, does that become an issue at all? Not an issue, but does that
Yeah,
become something you have to navigate?
it does. I mean, so I'm fluent in Italian, so when I do shows in
Mhm.
Italian, I can introduce the songs. Obviously, I sing them in English, so people just
Right.
are on their own, but I can at least kind of give them the framework of what the song's about. In Northern Europe, people generally speak English well enough.
Sure.
And in Holland, especially, like, they speak English practically like a second language. So there, it's not really a problem. In Germany, it depends on where I am. Definitely, I I try to slow down and enunciate really well when
Mhm.
if I'm telling a story before the song. And I definitely sometimes talk to people at the merch table, and I can tell that, like, we're just barely getting there on
Yeah.
on comprehension. But I think that the passion that that age group, and then that section of Europe has such a passion for American singer-songwriter music, that I could be
Mhm.
singing the phone book and they just wouldn't care, because
Yeah.
it that they're just so happy that you're there.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, I
so
find that I would imagine that, a European audience that is so willing to, like you said, seek out English speaking, uh, that it kind of lends itself to them being more open to the music and more invested in the
mhm.
music.
Yeah, for sure. For
That's
sure.
great. Let's talk now about your new album, Flying on Instruments.
Mhm.
When did it come out?
Just like 2 days ago. It
2 days.
came
Oh,
out
2
on
days ago. Oh, okay.
on February the 23rd, so just a couple
Okay,
days ago.
great. So it's just out.
Yeah.
I've listened to a few of the songs on it. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
Talk about the recording process. You brought the band back over to record in Dallas?
Yes. So we had these tickets that we had purchased. We did a Kickstarter in February of 2020. Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha, universe. We did this Kickstarter, raised all this money to make this record. And we had bought plane tickets to bring the band to Texas. We were actually going
Yeah.
to go to the studio in Austin that we like to work at sometimes. We thought we would just mix it up and go to a different place instead of our own studio. So we got all that lined up, and then COVID. So
Yeah.
we had these plane ticket credits that were going to expire in 2023 or something like that. And then also in the meantime, Rip and I had decided we were going to sell our house, which meant selling our studio there in Dallas. So we thought, wouldn't it be great to bring the band over for one last hurrah? Let's, use these plane tickets while we have them. It won't cost us anything. Let's just bring them over and let's just do it. And then we made that decision in like November of 2021, and then Omicron hit in like December
Yeah.
of 2021, and they were supposed to come in January of 2022. We were
Yeah.
like, oh God, how's this gonna, like, COVID is gonna kick us and the knees again. We're gonna have to cancel another recording session. So we basically just like asked our boys back in Italy, like, please just be careful and stay at home as much as you, because it's the
Yeah.
holidays too. It's Christmas and New
Sure.
Year's. It's like, just avoid people as much as you can. Try not to get sick so that you can get over here, and so that we can all close ourselves in a studio for 10 days
Yeah.
without getting each other all sick. So, and also we were supposed to work with John Dufalo. He was going to be the co-producer on the record with Rip. I saw him, I guess, sometime around late November, early December 2021, and he told us that he had this like crazy heart problem that they had found, and
Yeah.
he was going to have to undergo massive surgery, and that he wouldn't, he was so sweet. He was like, I'm not really sure if, I'll be able to be part of the sessions. We were like, yeah, John, you're definitely not going to be able to be part of the sessions. Also, because we were thinking again about the COVID thing. I was like, if you're recovering from open heart surgery, the last thing I'm going to do is close you in a studio with the five of us, So luckily we contacted our friend Joe Reyes, who's part of the Better Cut band. And I don't know if you know them, but they're based in San Antonio. He records and plays with a lot of Dallas folks as well. And I have toured with him pretty extensively. And he actually played on some of my previous records as well. So we asked him if he would be free. And we were able to work out a day basically that coincided like 5 days where the band could come over and then Joe could come up and we could all kind of get as much done as we could. So it was a strange session in the sense that like I usually come into the session pretty well prepared. Like the songs are at 98%. They just need to be polished. And that wasn't the case this time because I wasn't really planning, for a January. I didn't have on my calendar, okay, January 22, we're going to make a record. But then it was all of a sudden like, oh man, we got to hurry up and get this done because we're going to sell this house and we're going to sell the studio. And then like our plane tickets are going to expire. There were just all these things that kind of conspired to put the pressure on me a little bit, which was good in a way, I think, because otherwise I might have just dragged my feet on some of these slower songs.
Right.
And some of the ones that were more personally revealing, I might have just sort of shelved them. Instead, I was like, all right, I gotta get them out. And so we did. And we recorded it mostly live. I went back and did all the vocal overdubs in part because a lot of the songs didn't have finished lyrics when we were in the studio, but it's mostly live tracking with just a few fixings and boo-boos here and there, which was nice. It was a really organic way to work. It was a lot of fun.
And y'all did record at y'all's studio?
Yes. Yeah, we did.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah, it was nice. It was the final farewell to Electrophonic. Yeah. So yeah.
Have y'all been able to set up a proper studio there in Italy or?
We are working on it. We have all our gear here. Well, that which we didn't sell is all here. But we are actually, when we sold our house in Texas, we bought a house here. But the house that we bought here was a pile of bones. It needed a 1,000% overhaul. So we are in the process of the overhaul. So we're not there yet, but we will be soon. And then everyone can come take a Tuscan vacation and work. The Dallas music scene can just come record some records with us.
That sounds glorious. Yeah.
Doesn't it? I mean, that was kind of our thought, right? We were like, how wonderful would it be just to have our friends come visit and they can make records in Italy? And then
I think that's a great idea.
We'll take you guys out for good food and long walks in the Tuscan countryside. It could be worse. Come on.
Yes, you can sign me up right now.
Okay. You're on the list.
Great. One thing that kind of struck me when I was listening through the album is that there is not one song that is under 4 minutes. They're all 4 minutes and above. Was that something that was conscious? That did you? And the reason it struck me is because in an age like in the TikTok age where songs are becoming increasingly shorter, was that something you consciously did, or was it just kind of through the process of, like you said, recording? Well, kind of not fully fleshed out songs.
No. So I definitely tend to write longer songs just generally. I often have to go back and force myself to trim them to get them down. But I think because these songs were so introspective and a lot of these were just ones I did not feel comfortable trimming any of the lyrics. Like the lyric was there because I wanted it to be there, know? And we also gave the bands kind of some room to run that maybe we hadn't on previous records. So Better, for example, has a fairly long instrumental in the middle and at the outro as well. In fact, we ended up doing a radio edit for that one just so that we could try to get it out there because it is a very radio-friendly song, but I think it's close to 5 minutes. We actually chopped a song that I love that thematically would have fit quite nicely on the record. It's called Flood Zone, but it was 7 minutes long. It was chop it or we couldn't do the vinyl, Yeah. And because what's funny is it's 9 songs, but it's 40 minutes. So it's a good listening length for a record, but the songs are long.
It didn't feel long they felt great. They felt exactly like they should be, right? They didn't.
Well, that's good.
So I thought that did struck me. And I thought that was thought that was really neat. I loved that about it.
Oh, well, that makes me happy that that didn't bother you. It's funny because I've been asked that question several times. If that was
Oh, really? Okay.
like if it was an intentional thing, and I'm like, well, if anything, I mean, we definitely when we pulled it up in Pro Tools or whatever, when we were looking at it, we were like, oh God, like my heart kind of sank because I was like, oh, look at this one, it's 5 minutes and 30 seconds. Look at this one, it's like, oh, how's this ever going to work? And we did go, tried to trim a little bit here and there, but I mean, they just the songs just have to be what they want to be,
Exactly.
Like,
when you said you recorded live, did the length of the songs was that a bit of a challenge as you're, because you're trying to get full takes and.
Yeah. And you get tired or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, luckily I didn't have to because I was in the control room. I mean, I was playing through it, just playing direct. And for the boys, I'm sure it was difficult. I got to do mine later, just, on my own time. That my acoustic and my vocal is overdubbed, I think, on every track. But my musicians, they're great, and they also all went to conservatory, and they're here, and I mean, they're good, so they just were able to roll with it. But I'm sure they were sitting internally cursing me, going, "Are you for real with them?" And we definitely we let the songs play long, so that if we wanted to trim something later, we could, but we would have it, So like pretty much every instrumental, when we recorded it, at least we left them long intros at the top and the bottom and in the middle, and that way we would have some some stuff to play with if needed. So
that's so fun. Let's talk now. Obviously you've toured extensively in Europe. You've toured extensively here in the States. Tell me about the strangest gig you've ever played.
Right, man. When I first came across your podcast, I think Rip had showed it to me on Instagram or something. And he was like, you should contact Chris about this. And I was like, what would I even tell him? And he was like, I can think of 20 off the top of my head. I'm like, I know, that's my point, is like, well, how would I even narrow it down? I feel like there are so many ridiculous situations I've been in. Half the time they weren't even the gig itself so much as it was like what was leading up to it,
Mm-hmm.
Like we had, in 2012, I released a record that was recorded with all my Texas musicians, like John Dufalo and Jason Garner and Joe Reyes. And we brought some of those guys over to Italy for a full band tour. It was like, I'm just going to bite the bullet. I'm probably going to lose money doing this, but I was really proud of the record, and I really wanted to take my band over. And I mean, I'll be damned if of the 7 or 8 shows we had booked, there was like this crazy earthquake just before they got there. So one club collapsed. That show was gone.
Oh no.
The promoter of another show had a heart attack during the earthquake. He didn't die, but he canceled all of his shows.
Yeah.
So just to sort of give you an idea of whenever we're planning tours, we're always like, I wonder what the crazy malfunction is going to be.
Yeah.
But we had a very long tour in 2015 or 16. I forget when it was. I think it was 15. That we nicknamed the Tocco Le Palle. Is this a family-friendly recording?
It can be whatever you need.
Okay.
It to be.
I mean, this is not family-friendly, but so Tocco Le Palle is Italian for touch your balls. And it's a thing that it's basically the equivalent of cross your fingers, or whenever, whenever they go in soccer and they're kicking extra points, all the players touch themselves. As I think that in the States we do that too, and so some football teams, whatever. So we called this the Tocco Le Palle tour because it was one disaster after another, and at a certain point, our Italian booking agent had said something to Joe. He was speaking to me really quickly in Italian, and he was saying we're gonna have to whatever, and then he turns to Joe and he's like, you have to touch your balls. And Joe, of course, hadn't followed any of the conversation up to that because it was all in Italian. All he knew was this guy just turned to him and says this, and he's like, what? And so that particular tour that was full of these crazy incidences. We were booked at this show in Foligno. I probably wasn't even supposed to say where it was, but it was so long ago that they won't remember anymore. But I'm not asthmatic, but I'm very bothered by cigarette smoke, especially when I sing. And in Italy, smoking indoors is not allowed. It hasn't been since 2005. It's been outlawed everywhere, including music clubs. And sometimes music clubs will have one of those stupid rooms that's like the smoking room, you know, where everybody's like hermetically sealed in there. But generally speaking, you just don't find it at venues anymore.
Sure.
And so we were booked at this place called, I'm just going to say it, that they're never going to hear this. It was called Sound Barbecue, which already I was like, Sound Barbecue?
Yeah.
What sort of place is this? So we get down there and we start doing our sound check. And we kind of noticed that the place smelled pretty heavily of cigarette smoke. But I figured, well, like maybe it just was that way over the years and just never really aired out or whatever. Yeah. And Rip had actually just gotten over a whooping cough. Wow. Right? Like this is obviously pre-COVID, but like what adult gets whooping cough? But he had this, he had this crazy bout of it. We had to cancel like 5 or 6 shows because he was like dangerously ill, and he got over it. And then we got back on the road, and somebody, I guess like a friend of theirs, came in during sound check, a friend of the club owners, and he lit up and started smoking. And I was like, So I said something to the owner once we got off the stage. I was like, you know, like there's no smoking in here, right? And he was like, oh, I mean, like, you know, every now and then people smoke, but usually only when there's like a music show. And we were like, and I was kind of like, well, what does that mean? And he was like, well, I mean, you know, sometimes people just like, they come to listen to music and they smoke, but I mean, generally, no. He was being like really evasive about it. And I was like, I don't really know what this means, but I was like, aren't you guys only open when there's music? And he was like, I mean, yeah, generally. So it was like, so there is smoking, but only like, yes, always, basically, which is, and so he was like, but you can say something if you want from stage. I'm like, oh yeah, that'll be okay. Great. I'm sure that'll go over great. Like, I would love to do that. Yeah. I can't wait. So sure enough,
back on the musician. Yeah.
Right. So we get on stage, and cause I explained to him, I was like, you know, Rip's been sick, and I also just like, I don't sing well. Like I'll lose my voice. And he was like, no, I'm sure it'll be fine. You just say something once you're up there and everybody will understand. Okay. So we get on stage, and, you know, sure enough, the first song starts, and like I look out, and it's like a sea of, you know, little glowing coal ends of the cigarettes. I'm like, are you kidding? So we like battled our way through track 1, you know, and at the end of it, I said, okay, you know, grazie a tutti. And I'm like, sorry, you know, we would appreciate it so much if you guys could just hold off smoking until the break. We're going to do 2 sets. It would just really help us on stage. And everybody like looks fairly cooperative. Yeah. And then we launched into the next song, and I kid you not, I hadn't even started singing. It was like the intro. My eyes are closed because I'm off of my own. I open my eyes, and the room has emptied.
Oh no!
Everyone has gone outside to smoke, and we were like, "What?
What happened?
What happened?" And so it was best as we. And then like later, some people sort of trickled back in, but like essentially, we played to an empty room, and then at the break, when we got off stage and went outside, everybody came inside, and it was like these people could not stop smoking. It was the craziest thing. So. And I said something to the guy, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I don't, you know, it's just this. Nobody has ever asked that." And the thing is, this was in 2015, so it was a solid 10 years after Italy had outlawed smoking in public places. So it's not like it was this new thing that we were asking them to adhere to, you know?
Right.
And it was just one of those things where we were like, "Gosh dang it! Like we drove all this way to play for essentially no one. If I could just suck it up." Then I could just tell everybody, all right, come back, y'all come back in, and I'll play for you, and you can, you know, kill my lungs. But it was just like that was easily one of the strangest ones.
My favorite part of that is that he told you the whole time, "Oh, I'm sure it'll be fine," and then at the end he reveals, "Oh, well, no one's ever asked them to not smoke."
Right? Yeah. We're just like, what? And then another time we played this place in Holland. I think it was the same tour, but it was with a different band. I was touring with this Danish band called the Sentimentals that I had recorded a record with, and we did like a Northern European tour together. And we ended up at this place that was kind of like a circus event. It was in the Dutch countryside in this old farmhouse, and there was on the farmhouse grounds, there was a circus tent set up with acrobats for the children, I guess. I'm not sure. And then one of the local guys in the village I kid you not, I have video footage of this. He was moving his family to Ireland. He was Dutch, but they were moving to Ireland. Yeah. And they were going to travel in a covered wagon with a Clydesdale.
Okay.
I don't know how that was going to work when they got to the water crossing, because like I don't know if you can take that on a boat. Maybe you can
Yeah.
take your Clydesdale. I don't know. But he had his whole family loaded up in this
Like
wagon,
Oregon Trail style. Wow.
straight up Oregon Trail. And he proceeded to recite like a, what's the word I'm looking for? Like an epic poem that he had written that was about, it was about their travails that they were about to embark on. And it was all in Dutch, of course. So we were just sort of like, like following
Yeah,
along, like, okay, whatever.
sure.
And then so first there were the acrobats, then there was the Clydesdale family. And then they were like, okay, you're on. And so then we went and played this gig that was everyone in there, this is not ageist, but like it was essentially a nursing home gig. Like all
Yeah.
the young people stayed out home. I mean, stayed outside and played with the acrobats. And so did their like the parents of those kids. And everybody else was, I don't know, 80 and up.
Yeah.
And they were all just sitting there, just dead silent, staring at us up on stage. And I was like, trying to tell jokes. And you had asked earlier about English, younger, Dutch and German
Sure.
people, ages 50 and 60 and under, sure, English, not a
Yeah.
problem. Over 60, you kind of start to get into the era where they weren't watching like a lot of American TV growing up or whatever,
Yeah.
And I would say that probably they understood none of what I said at all,
So the jokes weren't landing.
the jokes weren't landing. There was just like these icy silences. And I was just like, oh my God, get me out of here. It's an afternoon show. Like, they're all like ready for afternoon nap. It was just
Yeah.
like, this is so, so very awkward.
I love it.
But what are you going to do? Like, you don't, some of these things, like you look at them online, you're like, this looks like a pretty decent place to play. I'll go give it a try. And you can't know till you get there. It's not like you're going to run away once you get there. You're just going to be like, oh, I gotta,
you gotta follow the Clydesdale family.
That's right. You got to play the hand you've been dealt. So yeah,
I love it.
we've had some doozies for sure. I also played this festival in Italy, in a town outside of Barolo. I forget exactly where it was, but it was called Collisione Festival. And it was pitched to me as I would be essentially opening for Robbie Williams.
Okay.
Like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Weird. I mean, I think he was pretty big in the States, but he was huge in Europe. Huge.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, how? But it was like you would be on the second stage.
Gotcha.
And it was one of those, our favorite, the thing that we musicians love the most. It's, well, we're not going to pay you, but it'll be great
exposure.
So it was like, and my booking agent talked me into it, and I was like, all right, I think it was actually, I don't think it was on the way to somewhere else. I want to say that one was a one-off. And so I paid my band to come up, from Rome, and then we drove up there, and we were in this like ridiculous, pavilion corner. I don't even know how to explain it, but we were basically playing at the same time as Robbie Williams.
Oh, okay.
So not only was nobody listening to us because they were in front of the big stage, but also the sound from the big stage, was like, we might as well have just not been there at all. Those are the sorts of things that make you go like, all right, maybe a 9-to-5 job is suddenly starting to look
Doesn't look all that bad. Yeah.
yeah, look, it's got certain charm, a certain appeal to it.
I love it.
Luckily, on the balance, the gigs have been more fun than not, and so obviously, otherwise I wouldn't still be doing what I'm doing. But
well, let's talk about your dream gig. If and that's dream bill, dream venue.
Oh wow.
You've talked about you love touring, you love travel, you love touring. Is there a country or a location that you'd love to tour? Your dream gig?
I've already been to a lot of places that I love. There isn't like a place that I'm dreaming of that I haven't been to yet, which is nice to be able to say. I mean, I'm not saying that they aren't out there. It's just they don't come to mind. But if I could just take like the Kessler and venues like the Kessler and just populate them in my path. And just play night after night of places like that. I mean, honestly, I've opened for several artists there. I've never done a headlining show there, but I've opened for artists that were fairly diverse in the music that they presented. And it didn't matter because the audience that I played for was always just top notch,
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I love the most about coming back to Texas, honestly, is like I've been able to play both the Kessler and the Heights, which is their Houston theater, and those kinds of shows I love. And honestly, I love support gigs, especially when it's a good pairing, because it's not always easy, because oftentimes the audiences, either they didn't know there was support or they're impatient for the main act to come on or whatever, but if you get the right kind of audience, it's like you kind of get to give them the muffin top. Like you pick your best 40 minutes worth of songs, and you only get the one chance maybe to blow them away, but you don't have to play like the hour and a half where they're starting to get kind of tired in the middle and like their attention is wandering. It's like, it's a very concise way of sort of presenting your music to the world. And I used to be quite intimidated by those, but over the years I've gotten to where it's not that I like them more than my own gigs. It's just that I get to go and it's easier. Like,
there's certainly less pressure. Yeah.
Yeah. I show up with my guitar. It's a super quick sound check. Later I get to sit back and enjoy somebody else's show.
Yeah.
And then I get to go hang out at the merch table with all of their fans that come and they're like, oh, I want to meet a new person. So I have really, really enjoyed those over the years, but I would love to be able to bring my full band to Texas and the East Coast as well. I have a fair number of people over there that are always asking me, why don't I come tour there? And the answer is because I don't have a booking agent in the States. And so it's just a lot of work and I don't have enough hours in the day to get it all done. But I would love to be able to just play like Iron Horse, the Parlor Room, Club Passum. Like I'm going in my mind down the East Coast thinking about all the beautiful venues that are over there. If I could just string together enough of them to make a little tour out of it, and play with my full band for, 100 people, I'd just be delighted. I mean, it just great. Sounds perfect to me. I've never, ever, ever wanted a giant stage, never wanted a stadium thing. Yeah. That sounds horrible to me. I just like the idea of being able to communicate and connect with, a couple hundred people in a good sounding room. That's kind of what it's about.
Absolutely. Well, what's next for Vanessa Peters? What do you have any plans to come back and tour this album? I know you did a little bit previously this month, but do you have plans to come back and tour more? Or is there more touring in Europe? What's next?
So we do have a fair number of shows coming up over here. So we've got some more in Germany and the Netherlands and some in Italy as well. I would love to say that I'll get back over there soon, but I think it probably depends a little bit on the house project. We gotta concentrate on having a roof over our heads. So that's unfortunately going to take up, I think, a lot of our emotional headspace for the next couple of months.
Absolutely.
I really, really hope to be able to do some touring though in the summer or the fall, just because I really love this record and I feel like I did not get to tour Modern Age very much because of COVID. It was really, really truncated all of our plan. Like I booked probably 3 tours that got booked and then canceled and booked and then canceled. And, and it kind of took the wind out of my sails a little bit professionally, just because like you fall out of the rhythm of doing that thing. You lose contacts, a lot of clubs closed.
Sure.
And then also just emotionally, like it would just got to be the point where I was like, why am I doing this? Like, it's just, and finally it did take off again. And I do feel like we're maybe kind of starting to pick up some momentum. So hopefully we'll be able to ride some good reviews from the record, and some radio airplay. We've actually been, we're charting on the Americana chart, which is the first time that's ever great. Happened to me. Yeah.
Oh, congrats. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's very cool. And so I'm really, really cautiously optimistic that maybe I can parlay that into some shows, but TBD, I guess.
You never know.
You really don't.
That's great. Well, Vanessa, thank you. This has been such a great conversation. I really enjoyed getting to talk to you. And now your day is done. You can go enjoy a glass of wine and
yes, have a nice dinner. I don't know if you could hear my stomach rumbling, but it was rumbly a bit. So. I'll go have a snack. So,
perfect. Anyway. Vanessa, thank you so much. This has been great.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, there she goes. Thanks so much to Vanessa Peters for coming on the podcast. Thanks to her husband, Rip, for connecting us and helping getting this set up. Y'all, please go follow Vanessa. Check out her website, vanessapeters.com. Follow her on the socials. Go listen to her new album, Flying on Instruments. It is fantastic. I guarantee you will love it. And until next time, If you find your gig sandwiched in between some acrobats and the Clydesdale family, or if you get approached by an angry, confused Italian asking you to touch your balls, just remember, the gig's a gig, right?